How do hormones influence our implicit power motive, our unconscious desire for impact, influence, and control? In this video, I'll explain how hormones influence our implicit power motives through three key systems: our rapid response hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine, our stress response system, cortisol, and our sex-specific hormonal patterns, testosterone in men and estradiol in women. Let's first define the terms. What are hormones? Hormones are chemical messengers produced by our endocrine glands that travel through our bloodstream to influence a wide variety of bodily functions and behaviors. Hormones are powerful molecules that act as our body's communication system. They orchestrate complex processes throughout our lives. To understand hormones fully, we need to explore their source, the endocrine glands. The prefix endo refers to something internal or within, while ex or exo refers to something external or outside. Endocrine glands such as the pituitary glands, adrenal glands, pancreas, ovaries in females, and testes in males are glands that secrete their products, hormones, directly into the bloodstream. So the N in endocrine indicates the internal release. For example, the adrenal glands produce stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which travel to different parts of the body and influence many physiological processes. Cortisol travels to liver, muscles, and fat tissues, influence metabolism and energy use. Adrenaline reaches the heart, lungs, and blood vessels, which prepare our body for fight or flight responses. The ovaries in females and testes in males produce sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone, which travel to reproductive organs, bones, muscles, and the brain, which influence sexual development, bone density, muscle mass, and even cognitive functions and mood regulation. Hormones are chemical messengers produced by our endocrine glands that travel through our bloodstream to influence different bodily functions and behaviors. You can think of the endocrine glands as different departments in an organization, each responsible for sending out specific types of messages or hormones that keep the entire organization, our human body, functioning smoothly. Hormones are like the body's internal email system. Just like emails carry important messages and instructions across an organization, hormones carry important signals throughout the body. Therefore, they influence our behavior and cognitive functions. For example, oxytocin, sometimes called the love hormones or trust hormone, influence social bonding and trust. Testosterone and estrogen not only regulate reproductive functions, but also influence aggression, social dominance, and emotional processing. After learning about hormones, let's turn our attention to implicit motives and how they are impacted by hormones. Implicit power motives are unconscious needs or desires to have an impact or influence on others, to gain prestige, or to have control over resources. Now, when we say unconscious, what do we really mean? Imagine your mind as an iceberg. The part above the water represents your conscious thought, the goals you set, the decisions you think you are making. But there is a much larger part of the iceberg hidden beneath the surface. This represents your unconscious mind, where implicit motives reside. These implicit motives are like silent directors of your behavior. They influence your behaviors, decisions, and emotional responses without you even realizing it. You may think you are choosing a career because it pays well, but an implicit motive for power may be steering you towards leadership roles without you knowing it. In David McClelland's book, The Achieving Society, published in 1961, he outlined three primary implicit motives that drive human behavior: implicit power motive, implicit affiliation motive, and implicit achievement motive. In this video, I'll focus on implicit power motive. In my future videos, I'll discuss the relationship between hormones and implicit affiliation motive and implicit achievement motive. These motives typically develop very early in our life, often before we even have the ability to verbalize our experiences. Implicit motives are shaped by our earliest interactions and emotions, which is why they operate at such a deep, nonverbal level. What makes implicit motives particularly intriguing is they often don't align with our explicit, consciously articulated motives due to internal conflicts. For example, you may explicitly state that you value collaboration, but have a strong implicit motive for power that leads you to compete in subtle ways. You may frequently interrupt others or steer discussions back to the topics where you feel you have expertise. You may respond to others' stories or achievements with your slightly more impressive ones. In team projects, you may naturally assume leadership roles without being asked. You may unconsciously adopt more dominant body language, like taking up more physical space or maintaining strong eye contact. You resist influence, like refusing to change your opinion or admit you are wrong, even in the face of compelling evidence. You may frequently offer guidance or suggestions where it was not requested. So, when people's words disagree with their behavior, it's often more reliable to trust behavior. Actions speak louder than words. While people may consciously manage or control what they say to present themselves in a socially desirable way, behavior is often driven by deeper, unconscious motives, making it a more accurate reflection of their true intentions, motives, or feelings. When a leader verbally emphasizes collaboration but consistently makes unilateral decisions, this inconsistency suggests their true underlying motivation may be more about control or power despite their verbal focus on collaboration. Paying attention to consistent patterns of behavior can provide us with more insights into someone's implicit motives than relying solely on their words. Given their unconscious nature, researchers can't simply ask people about their implicit motives. They are not consciously aware of them. So we measure implicit motives through indirect methods, such as analyzing the themes in stories people write about ambiguous pictures or by using the thematic appreciation test. When you take the thematic appreciation test, you are shown a series of ambiguous images depicting different scenes or interactions. You are then asked to create a narrative about what is happening in the image, who the people are, what they are thinking, and how the situation unfolds. Researchers then analyze those stories for recurring themes that review your unconscious motives, such as your need for power, achievement, or affiliation. Through these indirect measures, the researchers can identify the hidden drives influencing your behavior, which you may not be consciously aware of. Now let's focus on need for power, or N-power. Here, N stands for need. In psychology, N-power refers to a fundamental human motivation, the desire to have an impact, to influence others, to feel competent and in control. It's important to know that this does not necessarily equate to being power-hungry or manipulated, though they can be manifestations of the need for power in some contexts. The need for power can express itself in many ways, both pro-social and personalized. It may drive someone to seek a leadership position where they can make positive changes, or motivate a teacher to inspire their students. At its core, the implicit power motive is about the satisfaction from having an impact on one's environment and the people in it. Now, let's meet our key hormonal actors associated with implicit power motive. What happens in the body when someone who has a strong need for power? Imagine you are about to give a major presentation to the board of directors, or you are stepping onto a debate stage, or you are competing for a leadership position. If you are someone with a high power motive, your body launches two major types of hormonal responses. First, we have what I call our rapid response team, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Those hormones are released by your sympathetic nervous system. Think of this as your body's goal system. Epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, is primarily produced and released by the adrenal glands, particularly during stress or fight or flight responses. It increases your heart rate, dilates airways, and prepares your body for action. Norepinephrine is produced by both the adrenal glands and certain neurons in the brain. It heightens your alertness and focus, sharpens your mental clarity, and helps you respond quickly to challenges. Together, they create that energized feelings you get when you're about to take control of a situation. Epinephrine prepares your body to be physically ready to take control, and norepinephrine has a stronger role in cognitive functions and blood pressure regulation. For example, when power-motivated individuals face stressful situations like exams, their epinephrine and norepinephrine levels increase significantly. But not everyone with high power motive responds the same way. Think about two different types of leaders. First, imagine someone like a stereotypical hothead CEO who immediately reacts when challenged. They may slam their fist on the table or raise their voice. That's low activity inhibition. Now think about a leader who maintains a poker face when challenged. They appear calm while internally processing the situation. That's high activity inhibition. They are restraining their impulses. It's this poker face, power-motivated individuals, the ones with high activity, who show the strongest hormonal responses to stress. Their bodies are having an intense reaction, even though they may look completely composed on the outside. Why does this happen? Well, it connects to how our brain is organized. The right hemisphere of our brain particularly involved in this inhibition process, and it's also the same part that controls our stress response system. So when someone holds back their immediate power-related impulses, right brain is more engaged, which leads to a stronger release of stress hormones. Just because someone appears unaffected by power challenges does not mean they are not having an intense internal response. In fact, they may be having an even stronger reaction than the person who is openly showing their frustration. Has anyone ever experienced this, where you maintained a calm exterior in a challenging situation but felt your heart racing on the inside? That's your activity inhibition. The second major hormonal player associated with implicit power motive is cortisol. This stress hormone tells us a lot about how our body handle power and dominance situations. Cortisol is released through what we call the HPA axis, that is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This process begins in your brain's hypothalamus, which acts as a command center. The signal then travels to the pituitary, the body's master gland, before reaching the adrenal glands located above your kidneys. Think of it as a biological cascade, much like a series of dominoes falling one on the other, activating this very important response in your body. When you face a stressful situation, like giving a high-stakes presentation or interview, your hypothalamus releases a hormone called CRH. This triggers your pituitary to release another hormone called ACTH, which finally tells your adrenal glands to release cortisol. This is why scientists call cortisol your body's stress thermostat. Now, here is where power motivation comes in. In one study, researchers look at how power-motivated individuals responded hormonally to winning and losing. They conducted their research across two different countries, Germany and the United States. and found remarkably consistent results for both men and women. The pattern is striking. When power-motivated individuals win a contest, their cortisol levels don't show much change. It's almost as if their body is saying, all is well in my world of influence. But when they lose, their cortisol levels shoot up. Their body is essentially sounding an alarm bell saying, warning, we've lost control. This biological response makes evolutionary sense. Throughout human history, losing status or influence could have consequences for survival and reproductive success. Our bodies develop this stress response to motivate us to either try to regain our status, protect ourselves from further losses of power, or adjust our behavior to cope with our new lower status position. Think about a time when you lost an important competition or leadership position. Did you notice physical symptoms of stress? Maybe trouble sleeping, loss of appetite, or feeling more tense than usual. Those could well have been manifestations of this cortisol response we are talking about. So epinephrine and norepinephrine explain why power-motivated individuals feel physically energized when taking charge of a situation. And cortisol explains they experience intense physical and emotional reactions to losses of control and show persistent stress responses after experiencing a defeat. Now, let's look at how implicit power motive manifests differently in men and women through different hormonal systems. This really shows us how our biology adapts to support our desire and drive for influence in gender-specific way. Let's start with men. In men, testosterone plays the key role. Think about testosterone as the hormone of competition and dominance. Interestingly, if we just measure baseline testosterone, that is, the testosterone levels when nothing special is happening, we often see a weak correlation with implicit power motive. When we look at the numbers across multiple studies, we see a weighted average correlation of about 0.13. Now you might be thinking, that seems pretty weak, and you might be right, but there is a very good reason for this. Think of implicit power motivation like a car engine. When you are parked, the engine is idling. That's your baseline state. The real power of the engine only becomes apparent when you press the accelerator. Similarly, implicit power motive is a latent disposition. It needs the right situational triggers to become fully active. That's why we see such modest correlation in the baseline measurements. The real story emerges when men enter competitive situations. When power-motivated men win a competition, they tend to show testosterone increases, while losers show either decreases or no change. Why does this matter? Well, testosterone changes actually influence learning and behavior. In experiments where men had to learn new skills during competitive situations, those who experienced testosterone increases actually showed better implicit learning. That means they got better at the task without consciously realizing it. This is particularly important in dominance situations where quick, instinctive responses are essential. For women, estradiol, not testosterone, appears to be the key hormone of power. Estradiol is a form of estrogen, which is primarily female sex hormone. In addition to regulating the reproductive system, estradiol plays a key role in a wide range of functions, such as bone health, mood, and cognitive functions. Let's look at baseline levels. Single women who score high on power motivation tends to have a higher base level of estradiol. This relationship is actually quite strong and has been replicated across multiple studies. But the dynamic changes during competition are similar to how men's testosterone levels fluctuate. When power-motivated women win a competition, their estradiol levels increase. When they lose, their estradiol levels decrease. What we've discovered in humans actually parallels what we see throughout the mammalian world. Studies across different species have shown a consistent pattern. Dominant females tend to have higher levels of estradiol compared to subordinate females. For example, meerkat societies are usually led by females. The dominant female, often called the matriarch, shows significantly higher estradiol levels. This elevated estradiol helps maintain her status and control over the group. It even influences her ability to suppress reproduction in subordinate females. Likewise, in female primates, those at the top of the social hierarchy consistently show higher estradiol levels. These elevated hormone levels are not just a result of their dominance. They actually help maintain the dominance. Higher estradiol levels are associated with more assertive behaviors and better ability to maintain social control. Why is this evidence so important? Well, it suggests that dominance hierarchies and the biological mechanisms supporting them are not unique to humans, but rather a common strategy across species. The role of estradiol in reinforcing dominance suggests that power structures are, in part, shaped by inherent physiological processes. In fact, this hormonal influence on social rank and reproductive control appears to be a key factor in the survival and organization of many species. Think about your own experiences with competition. Have you noticed differences in how men and women in your life react to winning and losing? How might those hormonal differences help explain what you've observed? You may be wondering, what about testosterone in women? Well, that's still somewhat a mystery. Well, testosterone is clearly linked to dominant behavior in women. Its relationship with implicit power motive is less consistent than estradiol. This is likely because women produce testosterone differently than men, primarily through the adrenal glands rather than the gonads. In this video, we explained how hormones influence our implicit power motives through three key systems: our rapid response hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine, our stress response team, cortisol, and our sex-specific hormonal patterns, testosterone in men and estradiol in women. We learned how those hormonal systems respond differently when we win or lose, how they vary between men and women, and how they shape our unconscious drive for influence and control. In our next video, I'll introduce the relationships between hormones and another fundamental human drive, the implicit affiliation motive, our unconscious need for social connection.